Hello and welcome. I am your host, Glabe, and in today's video we are going to be building a Java application from the ground up. We're going to implement a remote splash screen that's going to brand this application to you and your company. We are going to be automating version checks between the local and the remote resources. We're going to download and extract our jar and zip archives on the fly. A couple of prerequisites on this one are that you have at least basic knowledge of the Java programming language and that you have the Java Development Kit 17 installed on your machine. You can use newer versions. I am just using the 17, which is the long-term standing one right now. Also, that you have a code editor that you are comfortable with. I personally choose IntelliJ. It is one I've been using for years, and it is the one that I will be using for my videos. Now, the resources for this, you'll be able to get the source code from my GitHub from the description of this video. It doesn't matter if you are a Java enthusiast, if you've been building software for years, if you're new to the scene. These applications are all about automatically updating features, and anybody that is interested in building robust or user-friendly applications, this is the video for you. Because in this tutorial, we're going to create a Java application that connects to a remote host, displays a customized splash screen for branding purposes, and then we're going to walk through the process of comparing local and remote versions, downloading the necessary jar files and zip archives, and then seamlessly updating your application without the user having to have any sort of intervention in between. So by the end of this tutorial, you're going to have a self-updating Java application that can help you maintain your software effortlessly across your customer's distribution. So, if that sounds like something you're interested in, make sure you fill up that cup of coffee and we'll dive on in. Alright, so we're going to keep the package structure pretty simple, and this is a pretty straightforward and simple project that we have set out here. It's named Auto Update Tool, and it simply just has a source file that is branded to Glabe Studios right now. First thing we're going to do is go ahead and create a new class. This is going to be a config. Now, inside of this config file, we're just going to have to define a couple of things, such as a local cache path and a local cache file. So, right quick, just bear with me while I just quickly define these two, this string and file. And we're going to be putting this into the, so we're taking for the cache path, so this is going to be where we're going to be storing our local information, like where we're going to be storing more or less the config file, or the config.properties file that we're going to be using to store the local version of the updater. So we're essentially going to be putting this into the user's application folder. So we're going to go into the app data, and then we're going to go into the roaming, and we'll drop this into Glabe Studios, and we'll just make this into another updater folder. And that will be our local cache path, and next after that is going to be a public file, and this is going to be get local cache file, which is just simply going to be a return of a new file, which consists of getting the path and concatenating simply config dot properties. Alright, so that's going to give us a couple of things here to kind of play with. So now, the next thing that we're going to need to do is get like a singleton of this config class. So we're going to make a private, if I can type, private static config and a public static config get config, and this is simply going to be checking if the objects dot is null config. Then a couple of things that we're going to want to do here is, well, config is going to be equal to new config, but we're also going to be doing a check for a local data, so we're going to call config dot check for local data, as well as we're going to be doing another method here, which is going to be loading the properties. Load properties. So what these are going to be doing, we're going to be creating those in just a moment. And then of course at the end of that we're just going to return the config, so that does not error out too much. Alright, cool. So next thing, we are going to be looking to have some sort of a properties, because we're going to be making sure to check for the properties folder first. So there is another string that we should technically define first. So I'm just going to come up here, and right below this one here we're going to have another public string get web address, and this one here is just simply going to return our remote host address that we're using. So in our case, in our second video to this one, we're actually going to be building the backend or the web host for this. So we're simply going to be going to http://localhost, and we're going to be going to port 8080 for testing, and that is going to be our web address base. Next, after this, we're going to need to define a properties file or properties variable. So this is going to be a well, we'll call it a protected for now, or we'll just go we'll go with package private static properties, and we're just going to call it data, and this is going to be equal to new properties. Okay, and we do want a getter for this, so we'll also come down here below our getter here, and we'll make a public properties get data, and that's just going to simply return return data. Alright, now we need to create our check for local data. So what exactly does that mean? Well, let's go ahead and create that method, and what this is going to do is it's just going to simply, well, we'll print out a print out a little system message here, which is just going to say checking for local cache path. And apparently you gotta spell local right. So now in here we're just going to make it var, call it file, and this is going to be equal to a new file that is the cache path, at the cache path. Alright, and so here we're going to make a quick little if check, and this is going to be if the file does not exist. So if the file doesn't exist, we're going to need to make it, okay? So here we go, where we're just going to say creating local dirs. And of course, if file file.makeDirs, so if we were able to successfully make the directories, then we're just going to print out that directory was created. So that's just going to come out there, and create the directories that we're going to need to put the system data, which is essentially the config file that we're putting in the application data. So now we're going to assume that the file exists. So in here we're going to do a try catch clause, and in here we're going to make a quick little check to see if the local cache file it doesn't exist, and pretty much do the exact same thing as above. So this is going to be getting the local cache file dot exists. So if it doesn't exist, basically same idea, throw out a message stating that we are creating the local cache file. And of course we need to put that in brackets. Alright, so now that just, of course, if you just gotta spell things right. So, creating the cache file, and this is where we're gonna make another quick little check, so that if get the cache file dot again make dirs, or sorry, no, this isn't dirs, this is now a file, my bad. So this is create, if we were to create new file, then the next thing that we're looking to do here is create new data, which is, and I got this backwards, yes, I guess we have to catch the clause for that guy, but if yeah, okay, so if it's not done, we're going to create new data. And again, I apologize for my horrible typing on this, but yeah, so other than that, we're going to create new data. So now the next thing that we want to do is load properties. So what that's going to do is essentially load some data into our data. But also we need to make a way to create new data as well as a way to save new data. So let's do a private void load properties, and this is simply going to be a try catch here as well, and this is going to be for get data dot load, and here we are going to go with files dot new input stream, and this is going to take paths dot get, and we're going to take our cache file and get the path for that. And once we're done, we're going to add in our catch clause for this IO exception. And make sure that we throw it. Or we could technically just print it. And just call an e.print stack there. Alright. And next we're going to need to have a way to create new data. So let's make another private void, not coid, void create new data, and this one's going to say simply just send out a message saying creating new default config data. And again, apparently you have to spell it wrong, otherwise it's not going to be right. Okay, so here we're going to go ahead and get data dot set properties, and this is where we're going to set our app version, and we're going to set it to a default of 0, 0. So this is just going to basically create our empty, or it's going to create a config.properties file, and it's going to fill that properties file with a key value pair. That key value is going to have to be app version is the key, and the value just so happens to be 0.0, the base or original version. From here, we're just going to make a simple call to save properties, which is a command that we have not made, but we are going to private. That does not need to be static. What am I doing? Oh my god. Private void save properties. And in here it's just going to simply say, we're just going to simply say saving properties file, or technically saving local cache file version. Yeah, there we go. That sounds about right. And again, we'll go with another try catch because we like to try our shit before we mess it up. So try.store and the store that we're going to be storage methods that we're going to be doing here is a new file output stream, and that file output stream is going to be the local cache file dot get path, and false. We're not appending anything to it quite yet. And we're also not adding any comments to that. Next, we have to add a catch, because this will have an IO exception. Just call it E. And again, we're just going to do the old-fashioned e.print. Alright, so that takes care of our properties. Now the next thing we're going to be doing is creating a splash screen. So we're going to go into our xyz.glabby studios, create a new file. This one's going to be a new class called splash. Alright, so this one here is going to be extending a JFrame. So the reason we're extending a JFrame on this one is simply because we are looking to, what we're going to be doing is making a blank undecorated J-frame in here, and we're going to be loading a J label on top of that J frame and making it into something that's going to be kind of cool. So to start out, we need a couple of things. We first need a private image icon, which is going to be our splash image. We are also going to need a private J label, which will be our splash label. Next, beneath here, we're just going to make a private static void main, and this is just simply going to be a new splash dot set visible true. And that's literally all it's going to do, is just be creating this new class and then setting it to true. So we're going to make a public public splash. This is just a simple constructor that's going to be initializing things. So we're going to go ahead and call a super and pass in the string. The string for this is going to be the title that would appear on top of the J-frame. So this would just be auto updater tool. If you want to change that later, go right ahead, be my guest. So once we're in here, we're going to be doing a couple of things. So let's start out by just printing that we're loading the splash screen. And if you don't surround that with quotes, it's not going to work, so just make sure to quote that. So in here, we're going to make a simple method that's going to call load splash image, and that's where we're going to make a fetch. I'm going to make a fetch out to our remote server to get the image, or the PNG file. So let's call this load splash image. And then we're going to create that method. And what this is going to do is alright, so we're going to make a try catch here. And this catch is going to be an IO exception. I think it'd be a faster way to do this. Generate these. Anyway, so now we're going to make a new variable here and call it image. And this is going to be equal to image IO dot read, and we're going to be reading from a URL. So this is going to be a new URL, which is going to be config.getconfig.getWebAddress.concat. And so this is essentially going to be, we're going to call this updater slash fetch, or no, I guess we'll call this fetch updater. Fetch updater splash. Splash, and then from there we're going to make the splash image equal to a new image icon, that is the image that we just fetched, and then the splash label is going to be equal to a new J label with the splash image. Alright, so that's going to set up our splash image and some of our basics. So the next thing that we're going to be doing is some UI manager stuff. This is just going to be in relation to a progress bar that we're going to be popping up. So we're going to go with UI manager, and this is in the swing package, and we're going to put a couple of properties here. So this one's going to have it take in a string property, and well, we're going to have a couple of things here. So I'm going to duplicate this twice. This top one is going to be taking in a repaint variable. The next two are going to be taking in colors, and the last one will be taking in a border. So these are all going to be from the progress. Do some of this a little bit easier. So these are all going to be from the progress bar. From the progress bar properties. Dot. The first one is going to be the repaint interval. This is just how often it's getting repainted onto the screen. Next one is going to be the foreground. Next one is going to be the background. And the last one is going to be the border. So now essentially here we're taking in new color. If I get that right. And colors that we're going to go with here will be 32, 32, 32. Why not? And 52, 52, 52. Why not? Kind of darkish. So, also we're going to need to go with a border factory. And we're going to create a line border. And we're going to go with a new color, and 75, 42, 180, and give that a 2 thickness. So it's going to be about 2 pixels wide, and it's going to be a purple border around some black text, or some black background. And so the next thing that we're going to need to do is some housekeeping on this. Now that we have our UI manager set up, we have our splash screen loaded. Next we want to do is set resizable to false. We don't want anybody resizing this this image. We're also going to set this to be always on top. This is just again for branding purposes, and the fact that we're going to be making this. We want this to be something that's going to stand out for a couple of seconds. So once we do this, we're going to create a delayed task, which will just help in the branding. So after we define that we're going to set this always on top, we need to set up a size. So we're going to set the size. The size is going to be equal to the splash image's width and height. So splash image dot get icon width, and then dot get. There we go. There. So now we're setting that up to the width and height of our image. Setting the default close operation is just going to be simply dispose on close. And the next thing is going to set the location relevant to null. Now what that does is it allows the application to be centered in the screen of your user's computer. By setting it null, by setting the location relevant to a null component, it's just going to simply dead center the image on the screen, or the application on the screen, or the window on the screen, or JFrame in this case. So the next thing we're going to do is set a undecorated to true. The reason we're doing this is that's going to get rid of the border around the image, or the border around our JFrame, so that we're left with just essentially a panel. And the next thing we're going to do after this is set the background, and this is going to be equal to a new color that is going to be just simply 0, 0, 0, 0. This is making it simply transparent. Next, after that, we're going to take our splash label and we're going to set the bounds of this. By setting the bounds, what we're going to be doing is, where do we want this to place? Well, for first off, I want to start it off at 0, 0. Next, I want to get the splash image's height again, height and width, so that we're setting this to the appropriate size. So now, what we have left to do is to get our content pane, set the layout, and that is going to be null as well. And then we're going to get the content pane again, and we're going to add our splash label. Okay, and what does all that do, Mike? Okay, so now that we're defining our progress bar, we're setting the size, setting it so that it can't be resized. It's always going to be on top, and we're setting up the size of it to be equal to the image. We're creating our label. We're setting the label to be the size of the image. We're putting the label on the component that happens to be now transparent. So long as our image is transparent, basically the thing that's going to come up on the screen is going to be any shape of whatever it is that the image is. So it's going to look kind of cool. It gives you that ability to kind of have a frameless, wireless sort of image as a branding. So the next thing that we need to do here is make a delayed task. This delayed task is simply going to be its own thread or its own timer that is just going to sit around for X milliseconds. So we're going to go ahead and create another new class. This one we're going to call delayed task. Yeah, right, really fancy with that one, putting a lot of time into the name of that one. So here we're going to make an instance of a timer. Just simply call it timer, new timer. Alright, and in here we're going to have a static void, and we're just going to call this schedule. And it's going to take in two parameters. One is going to be a final runnable action, and the other is going to be the delay in milliseconds. So what we're going to go into here is we're going to make a final timer task, and it's just going to be a task, and it's going to be equal to a new timer task. And don't worry if this does not mean a whole lot to you. That's perfectly fine. We're just going to simply go with our action dot run. So what this does is it simply creates a task that's going to run after a specific delay in milliseconds. So now we're going to come outside of this and we're just going to call timer dot schedule, and this is going to take in the task and the delay that we've created in milliseconds. Why is my timer make you static as well? There we go. If I'm making one static, I gotta make the other static. Just remember that. Okay, so that is our delayed task. Now, how are we gonna call that? Like, what the hell does that even do? Okay, so we're gonna come in here and go with delayed. We're gonna create a delayed task. We're gonna call the schedule method in it, and we're going to give it a runnable lambda. and fill it with some information, and then we're going to pass in how long we want this to be branded for, which in our case is just simply 3,000 milliseconds, or 3 seconds. So next we are going to need to make a new an input-output thread. Now what this is going to do is it's going to take care of some of the heavy lifting as far as updating. So let's go ahead and create a new updater thread. So we're just going to go ahead and call this updater thread. Yeah, okay. Because I don't really have a better name for it. So this is going to extend a thread. And let me set up a few things here. Private string latest, which is going to essentially be, or I guess to make that proper, we'll call this remote version. We need a private integer. This is just for tracking blocks. And we're going to set blocks equal to zip, as well as we're going to make another one, just simply block, and that is going to be equal to 1. Now we're also going to be making a package private byte array, which is just going to be our bytes. New byte array, and that is going to be equal to there we go. So next we need to make 2 private booleans, and these are, one is requires update, which is false by default. The other one is going to be a private started download, which is also going to be false by default, and a boolean. Okay, so next we're going to need to make a couple of other input outputs. This is going to be a jar input stream and a jar output stream, which are essentially going to be our buffered input and buffered output, or file output. So let's make 2 more private variables. So private jar input stream, which is going to be the buffered input, and that will be null to start out with. Private jar output stream, which is going to be the file output, which is also going to be null by default. Also, we're going to need a progress bar. So this is going to be a private progress bar. I guess just call it bar. Okay, we're going to need a private JFrame, which will just be frame, and the local path in which we're going to be putting the file itself. So final string local path is equal to the system.get property of user.home, and then we're going to concatenate that we want to stick this then into a GLABE Studios. I'm putting the dot in front of that because by most most operating systems will make that a hidden file by default, so it's not something that your users would end up seeing on their machine. So what we're going to stick this into here /client, because this is essentially going to be the user's jar file that they're going to have, which will essentially be the client for all intents and purposes. So next thing from here, we're going to need to make a double. So this is going to be a private double, and this is going to be getting the latest client version. So get remote client version, and this is bare minimum going to return 0.0 at if everything fails. But we are going to make a try because we are going to be having some actual connection fun. So we're going to make a var, call it con or connection. This is going to be equal to a new URL, which is going to be the config.getConfig.getWebAddress concat, and this time we're going to be going to fetch updater version, and then from there we're going to open the connection. Next, we're going to take another variable. This one is going to be a buffered reader. And this buffered reader is going to take in an input stream reader. The input stream reader is going to be the connection dot get input stream. Cool. So clicking most buttons. So next thing we need here is another variable, and this one is going to be version, equaling the buffered reader dot readline. Very complicated. And we're just now going to return double dot parse double, and that is version. So now we've got to add a catch for the connect exception. This will be a connection exception. And now for this one here, this is going to mean that something sort of kind of critical-ish went wrong with the connection. So we're going to actually be sending out a J option panel. Option pane dot show message dialog. We're going to stick it into a nulled component because it's not going to be going to anything. But then we need to send in essentially a string or a message with that. And from that as well, we're going to be passing in a J option, which is going to be a warning. J message option panel, J option panel, option pane dot warning message. There it is. Okay. Da 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 da. And I think that is about right. No, I need a title in there as well. Is it? Yes, title. Okay, so the title is just going to be update server error, and you can theoretically make this be whatever error code you want it to be, I'm just going to make it say -1. That way, if somebody tells me that, hey, they had an update server error and the error code was -1, I can do a quick search and come and find that. Also, we're going to be doing a secondary catch on this one here, which is just going to be another I/O exception, and for all intents and purposes, we're just going to ignore that one and just not deal with the I/O message. However, if something went wrong here, we do want to tell them that the connection timed out. So this would be connection timed out. .concat new line update server may be offline. Please try again later. If this continues, please report to staff. Then I'm going to let them know that we're going to shut the thing down, or we're going to shut the... Okay. .concat shutting down, and then we just go with a system dot exit Jesus exit, and we're going to pass this a code. This one here we've already said was -1, so we're going to pass in a status of -1. Now, the reason that we do this here on the exit is because when you stop your application, sometimes it will, if it stops for any given reason, it will specifically print out an error code on the console. So if this one happens to have an error, it will print out that it finished with an error code of -1, which also gives you as a developer a heads up on what exactly it is that went sideways. So, next thing that we need to do is we will need to check if the version of the local client and compare it to that of the file server that we just made the method for. So, we need to now make a method so that we can check for an update. So, public void check for update, and this one here, and I apologize, this is going to be a long video. I might actually break this up into 2 parts given the actual length of this. So in our next video we will take care of checking for the update, where we will get the local version, get the remote version, compare the two of them, and if they need to be updated, then we will run through the process of fetching out and getting the jar and the zip files, as well as I will show you how you can download and fetch a jar file and all of its entities inside, as well as I will show you how you can download a zip file and then how you can extract the zip file to put it into its certain things. So it kind of like in a simple realistic usage example, if you had a game server that you wanted your players to have their game client and their cache for their game up to date all the time, we could use something like this so that when they first run their game, it's going to make sure that their local client or their local application they're running from you is up to date, and if it's not, it's going to reach out, fetch the latest update, make the update, and then it's going to launch itself. So, because this is getting a little long, we are going to cut this into 2 parts, and if you're interested in getting the second part, hit that subscribe button and be notified when I send it out. And also make sure to hit that like button if you learned anything. I will be recording the second video right after I get this one recorded, so you can expect the second part to this video within the next 24 hours. Potentially sooner, depends on how my day goes. So, if you made it this far, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and I appreciate your time, I appreciate your patience, and keep on coding. Keep that coffee cup full, and we'll see you next time.